My daughter-in-law rearranged my entire house, like I was already gone. My son stayed quiet. I stayed quiet too. Then one morning, the hot water was gone, the Wi-Fi was dead, and they finally figured it out this house had never belonged to them. The cake's a little dry today, Helga. Did you grab it from the discount bin again? Janine asked, pushing a tiny sliver of marble cake onto her plate with her perfectly manicured nails. My son Lucas just stared down into his black coffee, like the answers to all his problems were floating in there. I took a slow sip of my tea and watched them both. In my own house, the one I'd lived in for 40 years, I suddenly felt like an extra in someone else's bad play. They'd been living with me for 3 months now. Lucas had lost his job, and Janine wasted no time suggesting they give up their expensive city apartment and temporarily move in with me. Temporary turned permanent, real fast, and gratitude turned into straight-up arrogance. Janine had already shoved my lace doilies into the basement and reorganized the entire kitchen to suit her system. "We need some fresh energy in here," she'd announced. I didn't take the bait about the cake. I just set my teacup down quietly on the saucer. My late husband had left me this house free and clear, well-kept and paid off. It was my safe place, my inheritance. But Janine was already talking about turning my sewing room, the guest room, into a home office for herself. Lucas didn't say a word. He'd become a shadow of himself ever since Janine took over their finances. I looked her straight in the eyes. She didn't flinch. There was this mix of pity and superiority in her gaze, like she figured a woman in her late 60s would be easy to manage as long as you made her feel useful. Big mistake. One she was about to pay for dearly. I caught her nudging Lucas under the table. He cleared his throat. "Mom, we were thinking we could take over the utility bills starting next month. That way you won't have to deal with all the paperwork." Nice offer, I thought. Or the first step toward taking control of the whole house. I gave them a thin smile. It was time to change the tracks before the train went completely off the rails. The next morning, I was up at 6, like always. Some people call it old lady early rising. I call it the upside of getting older. You get to see the world before it puts on its mask. I went down to the basement and turned the main hot water valve almost all the way off. You could still wash your hands, but one of Janine's 20-minute luxury showers, that was about to feel like an ice-cold adventure. When I walked into the kitchen, Janine was already messing with my beloved coffee machine, tweaking it so it only made that weak modern stuff she liked. "Good morning, Helga. By the way, we need more room in the fridge. I moved your jam jars to the pantry." I just nodded. "No problem, Janine. I'm actually planning to do the weekly shopping a little differently from now on." Lucas shuffled in, still half asleep. "Mom, the shower was barely warm this morning. Is something wrong with the heater?" I shrugged. "Maybe it's overloaded. 3 people use a lot more than one Lucas. The system's old, just like me." I saw Janine's forehead crease. She hated any kind of inconvenience. After breakfast, I sat down at my little desk and opened the household ledger I'd kept for years. Every kilowatt hour, every grocery dollar was written down. I crossed out the line for shared dinners. From now on, everyone was on their own. No need for a fight, just clear facts. Later that morning, I moved the Wi-Fi router into my bedroom and locked the door. I knew the first real lesson was about to start. Without internet, Janine couldn't do her influencer work. And without hot water, the house would lose its charm real quick. I heard Janine cursing upstairs, hunting for a signal. Lucas called for me, but I was already out in the garden pruning my roses. The silence felt wonderful. I wasn't angry. I was just done being nice. If you want to set the rules in someone else's house, you'd better make damn sure the foundation belongs to you. "Helga, the internet's not working," Janine yelled from the second floor. I didn't answer right away. Only when she stormed down the stairs, face red with anger, did I look up. "Oh, I'm sorry about that." I switched the plan. The old one was too expensive, and since I mostly just check my email, a little mobile hotspot is plenty for me. Janine stared at me stunned. "But I need the internet for my work." "How am I supposed to post my collaborations?" I smiled sweetly. "That's too bad. Maybe you two should get your own plan. Then you'd be a lot more independent from me." Lucas stepped up behind her. "Mom, you can't be serious. We're family." "Exactly, Lucas," I said calmly. "That's why I don't want you feeling held back by my old habits. Independence is what you wanted, right?" There was no more shared lunch after that. I made myself a simple omelet and washed the pan right away. When Janine came in to boil pasta, she found the stove locked with the old child safety cover I'd installed years ago for Lucas. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. Safety first, Janine. When I'm not in the kitchen, the stove stays off. I get nervous about fire hazards with so many people in the house. I watched her take a deep breath. She wanted to explode, but she knew legally she was just a guest. No rent, no lease, just my goodwill. And right now, that goodwill was on vacation. "We need to talk, Helga. This isn't working. We feel like intruders here," she said through gritted teeth. "Intruders," I repeated thoughtfully. "I thought you felt like the new owners. That's sure how you acted when you cleared out my sewing room." Lucas looked down at the floor. He knew exactly what I was talking about. I picked up my plate and headed to my room. I turned the key in the lock. That soft click sounded louder than any scream. The next day, the kitchen stayed dark. I decided to eat out. I sat in a little cafe in town enjoying a slice of pie while I checked my bank app on my phone. I still had power of attorney over the emergency account we'd set up for Lucas after his dad passed. It was meant to be a safety net. I saw Janine had been pulling out bigger and bigger amounts for beauty and lifestyle stuff. Lucas was too weak to tell her no. I called the bank not to freeze the account. I couldn't do that easily, but to officially remove my name and let them know I was stopping the monthly $500 I'd been giving them. It was my money, a gift that had just run its course. When I got home, the house felt heavy with silence. The living room lights were off, the heat turned way down. Janine sat at the kitchen table in front of a pile of unopened mail. "Your dad always said you pay your bills first." "Lucas," I said as I walked past my son, who was slumped in the corner. He looked up. "The bank called Mom." "Why did you cut off the money?" "Because you're adults," I said simply. "Yesterday you told me you wanted to take over the utilities. I figured you must be doing well enough that you didn't need my little help anymore." Janine jumped up. "That was just a gesture, Helga. We wanted to help you." I shook my head. "Helping looks different, Janine. Helping doesn't mean moving a widow's furniture to the basement or hogging the hot water for hours." I walked to the fridge and stuck a small note on the door. "Starting tomorrow, the fridge is shared. Please use only the top shelf. The rest is reserved for my groceries." It was a clear line in every sense. Janine read the note, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. The fear of having to live in a reality where someone else wasn't footing the bill. One morning while they were still asleep, I changed the lock on my sewing room. The old one had been too easy to pick. Now it had a solid deadbolt. My sewing room was my sanctuary, and Janine had already started stacking her boxes for her online shop in there. I carried her stuff out to the hallway myself. I didn't throw anything away or damage it. I just put it exactly where it didn't belong, right in their way. When Janine woke up and saw the boxes in the hall, she lost it. "What do you think you're doing? That's wasted space. We need that room." I stood calmly in my bedroom doorway. "This is my house, Janine, and this is my room. You have a bedroom and a small sitting area. That's it." "Lucas, say something," she screamed. Lucas came out of the bathroom, face still wet. "Mom, it's only for a few more weeks until Janine's business takes off." I looked at him with nothing but deep disappointment. "Lucas, you've been here 3 months. Your father worked hard for this house. He didn't build it so it could be a warehouse for cheap plastic jewelry from China while I get pushed into a corner." I handed him an envelope. Not a lawyer's letter, just a list. "These are the costs for the next 30 days electricity, water, heat, trash. If you want to stay, I expect this amount by the 1st of the month, cash or transfer." Janine laughed bitterly. "And if we don't, then you'll find out how uncomfortable a house gets without power and water in the middle of winter. I'm heading to my sister's in Northern California for 2 weeks to winterize the place, which means draining the pipes and flipping the main breaker." Janine went quiet. She knew I meant every word. I wasn't one for big dramatic speeches, but I always followed through. Their room to maneuver was getting smaller every day. The next few days were filled with icy silence. Janine tried passive-aggressive stuff, slamming the dishwasher, banging cabinet doors. I didn't react. I'd already packed my suitcase. Not to run away, but for a strategic absence. One evening, I overheard her whispering in the living room. "We have to make her want to leave Lucas. If she realizes she can't handle it here anymore, maybe she'll move into some senior housing. The house is way too big for one person. Lucas's answer was so quiet I barely caught it, but he didn't argue. That was the moment the last thread of sentimental feeling in me snapped. My own son was listening while his wife planned how to push me out of my own home. The next morning, I called for a junk removal service to pick up the furniture she'd banished to the basement, my dad's old armchairs and everything. "What are you doing?" Lucas asked, horrified as the guys loaded the chairs. "Making space, Lucas. But not for you. I've decided to rent out the downstairs to a nice college student who'll help me in the garden. You two already have the whole upstairs anyway." Janine came rushing in. "Rent it out." "You can't do that. We need the space." "Actually, I said calmly while tipping the truck driver. "I've already found someone, a young woman studying to be a teacher. She moves in when I get back from my sister's." The news hit like a bomb. A stranger in the house meant Janine couldn't run things however she wanted anymore. She couldn't wander around in her pajamas or leave her stuff everywhere. The privacy they'd fought for was gone in an instant. And the best part, it was completely legal. My right as the owner. Lucas looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He wasn't looking at the soft old mom anymore. He was looking at the woman who had held this house together for decades. 2 days before I left for my sister's, we sat at the kitchen table again. This time, Janine had cooked plain spaghetti with tomato sauce. She was trying a new tactic, being nice. "Helga, we've been thinking. Maybe we were a little too quick with the changes. We just want everyone to be comfortable." I ate my portion in silence. "That's nice to hear, Janine, but actions speak louder than words." "Where's the money for the utilities?" Lucas slid a small stack of bills across the table. $300, not even half of what I'd asked for. "That's all we have right now, Mom. The car repair was expensive. I didn't touch the money." "Keep it. You're going to need it." "Why?" Lucas asked, suspicious. "Because I already had the new tenant send her deposit today. I used it to install a new smart lock on the front door. Everyone gets an electronic key fob. Yours are only programmed until the end of the month." Janine went pale. "You're going to lock us out." "No," I corrected her. "I'm giving you the independence you've always talked about. You wanted to be treated like adults. Adults don't live rent-free at their mom's house while they rearrange her belongings. You now have exactly 3 weeks to find your own place or figure out a solution that doesn't ride on my back." Lucas started to protest, but I raised my hand. "No more discussions. I leave early tomorrow morning. Power stays on upstairs, but the kitchen and living room will be locked. I don't want strangers or your friends using my private spaces while I'm gone." I stood and walked to the window. The first frost was settling on the grass outside. "It's going to be a cold winter, Lucas. I hope you find someplace warm." In that moment, I wasn't a bitter mother. I was simply a woman taking her peace back. I spent 2 wonderful weeks with my sister. We talked about old times, but hardly mentioned my situation. I wanted to enjoy the break. My phone stayed off most of the time. When I turned it on, there were dozens of messages from Lucas. "Mom, the water's gone." "Mom, Janine won't stop crying. Please call back. We don't even know how to run the washing machine with the basement locked." I deleted them without reading. They were old enough to go to a laundromat, old enough to solve their own problems. When I came home after 14 days, I expected chaos. What I found instead was absolute quiet. The house was clean. The boxes in the hallway were gone. When I opened the front door, it smelled like lemon cleaner instead of Janine's heavy perfume. I walked into the kitchen, my fridge untouched. Upstairs, I heard soft packing sounds. I sat down in my favorite armchair and waited. An hour later, Lucas came down the stairs carrying 2 suitcases. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clearer than they'd been in months. "We're moving out, Mom. Janine already went to her mom's. I found a small room at a boarding house until I get back on my feet." I nodded. "That's a good decision, Lucas." He paused and looked around the living room. "I only understood what we did when we were sitting here alone and everything went dark. We treated you like a piece of furniture that was in the way. I'm sorry." It was the first time he'd apologized sincerely without Janine pushing him or standing behind him. I felt a lump in my throat, but I stayed steady. Sorry is the beginning, Lucas. Standing on your own 2 feet is the goal. He set his key fob on the side table. I'll call when I'm back on my own feet. Then he left. No drama, no yelling. The next few weeks felt strange. The house was mine again, but it felt bigger than before. The college student I'd mentioned was real. Her name was Claire. She was quiet, respectful, and followed every rule. She took the old guest room and we shared the kitchen on a set schedule. It worked beautifully. She helped with the grocery runs and I taught her how to make a proper beef roulade. Janine never reached out again. Lucas, though, called once a week. He was working at a warehouse way below his qualifications, but he was earning his own money. He told me he and Janine had split. Without my money and the big house, she didn't have a reason to stay. It hurt for him, but it was a necessary lesson about relationships built on convenience. One afternoon, he stopped by to pick up the last of his things. We sat in the garden and I offered him a slice of apple pie, this time homemade. It tastes like it used to, he said quietly. No, Lucas, I answered. It tastes like now. The past is over. He smiled sadly. You changed the front door code again, didn't you? I shook my head. No same system, but I deleted your fob. If you want to visit, you have to ring the bell, just like any other guest. He swallowed hard, then nodded. He finally understood the boundary. He was still my son, and I loved him, but he was no longer the man of the house. He was a visitor in my life now. When he left, he didn't leave a mess or any hard feelings. I closed the door and locked it. It wasn't out of fear, it was an act of self-respect. I went into my sewing room, sat down at the machine, and started stitching a new curtain for the living room. The fabric was light and bright. A fresh start for an old house. 1 year later, my 71st birthday. I hadn't planned anything big, just a quiet dinner with Claire and a few old friends. In the afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Lucas. He was wearing a suit and holding a small bouquet of flowers. He looked healthy, stronger than before. Happy birthday, Mom, he said, handing me the flowers. Can I come in for a minute? I let him inside. We sat in the kitchen, which was arranged exactly how I liked it again. He told me about his new sales job and his small but nice apartment in the city. I'm paying for everything myself. Not much left at the end of the month, but it's mine. I was proud of him, even if I didn't gush about it. That's the right path, Lucas. He hesitated, then placed a small envelope on the table. This is for the utilities I owed from back then. I saved it up. $1,200. I looked at the envelope. It was the money we'd fought so hard over. Keep it, Lucas. Invest it in your future. I don't need it. He shook his head. No, take it. Not because you need it, but because I do. To close the chapter. I understood. I took the envelope and put it in my desk drawer. It wasn't just paying a debt, it was restoring dignity. We talked for another hour, then he stood up on his own. He didn't wait for me to dismiss him. He knew the rhythm of my life now. At the door, he gave me a quick hug. Thank you, Mom, for being tough. I would have gone under otherwise. I watched him walk to his little car. He drove away and I stayed in my house. It was warm, the water ran, the internet worked, and most importantly, there was peace. I closed the door, not against the world, but for myself. I was Helga, 70 years old, and I was finally the mistress of my own life again. Sometimes you don't need words to set boundaries, just clear consequences. Kindness without limits quickly gets taken for granted.